Good evening. I'm Bob Becker, director of the Strom Thurmond Institute, and it's always my pleasure to welcome the folks to the Calhoun Lecture Series. This starts our 11th year, and it's an exciting year. Tonight's a very special program because it's commingles with the Parks, Recreation, and Tourism Management Department on campus, and the PRTM department is one of the strongest in the country, and so they are able to draw very top people to come into some of the events. And today they featured their Hartzog lecture, which was done by Gary Mackless, the science advisor for the Park Service and an old friend, and just the talent that's drawn in to this area for this event makes for opportunities for a lot of us on campus, and we were happy to capitalize on that. So before we start tonight's program, please turn off your cell phones and any other things that beep or make any noise during the program. It's very distracting to the speakers and embarrassing, and since I've been on both ends of that situation, I always ask people to turn them off. Following the presentation, Sheldon will be signing his book, Gloryland. And I had the good opportunity to go over the book for 2 interviews with PBS on the South Carolina Educational Television Radio program. That's the Clemson Your Day program. And they aired this past Monday and the previous Monday. And when I picked up the book, I didn't quite know what to expect. But what I found was a narrative by a poet telling just one of the most wonderful, engaging stories that had about the 9th Cavalry and about the national parks. And it was a very compelling book. So I encourage you, if you're interested in any of those topics, to take a look at this fine book. Now, to introduce Sheldon and give him a proper introduction, I'm very pleased to introduce my friend Brett Wright. And Dr. Wright is the chairman of the PRTM department at Clemson and has spent the past few days pulling together that Hartzog lecture series, named, of course, after the legendary park director George Hartzog. Brett comes from George Mason University, and so, Brett.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. It is my honor to introduce our speaker tonight. There's a couple of connections we've had, and Bob mentioned the 9th Cavalry, and when I was in the service, I flew for the 9th Cavalry, and I knew about the Buffalo Soldiers. But this is 2 separate parts of my life, and as I've worked with national parks and all that, it's kind of come together in very interesting ways. Our speaker tonight is a native and born in the upstate of South Carolina, but moved to Detroit, Michigan, where he grew up. He's a graduate of the University of Michigan with a degree in poetry. He's been with the National Park Service as an interpretive ranger since 1987. He's worked at Great Basin and Yellowstone National Parks and several of the parks units around Washington, D.C. in the National Capital Region. And he is now an interpretive ranger in Yosemite National Park. If any of you all have seen the Ken Burns series on National Parks, America's Greatest or Best Idea, you saw Shelton featured there. But I'd like to share with you a little bit of a glimpse of the experience that I had that was truly inspirational for me. This past May, I was out in Yosemite as part of a executive leadership program that we were conducting with the Park Service, where we had 15 superintendents from national parks and 15 park managers from all over the world. And as we were sitting on a picnic table in the Mariposa Grove of big trees, having a box lunch on a beautiful spring morning there in the upcountry, snow still filling the woods, we were talking casually with our colleagues, and I heard an Indian flute in the distance. And it kept getting louder and louder and louder. And soon, this very elegant black man walks out in full cavalry uniform. And he told a story in first-person interpretation of the role of the Buffalo Soldiers and why it was good duty to be in Yosemite. It is my pleasure to introduce our Calhoun speaker, Shelton Johnson.
Thank you, Bill. Hi. How are you? How are you really? Oh, good, good. I mean, I have to ask that, you know. Well, I should start out by saying that it's a very emotional experience for me to be here, not just in South Carolina, but in Clemson and in this particular region, because my father was born and raised in Spartanburg, South Carolina, and I lived in South Carolina. I lived in Spartanburg for about a year or so, and it had a profound impact on me, primarily through my father, who told stories about what it was like to be African American in South Carolina in the 1930s and 40s during Jim Crow, prior to the Civil Rights Movement. He had a very challenging time. My grandfather told my dad, because my dad was raised to believe that he was somebody, that he was a human being. And my grandfather told my father that if he didn't leave the South, that he would one day find him hanging from a tree. And that's why my dad left the South. But he always talked about it because this is where his roots were, right here. And so it had an effect on me to such a degree that when I had to choose of all the states, you know, and all the states in the South, when I had to choose the home for my main character in my novel and also my interpretive program, I chose South Carolina. And I chose his hometown, which is Spartanburg. So this is a homecoming for me, both personally, it's a homecoming for me, also imaginatively as well. But I don't know if you folks know what I've been doing. Sometimes I don't even know what I've been doing. So I thought it'd be great to just kind of refresh people's memory by showing a short 12-minute film that was made by Ken Burns about the work that I've been doing in Yosemite about the Buffalo Soldier story. How's that sound? Okay, so we're going to start with that, and then I'll come back up here. Okay. Most people's experience of a park is a park like the city park, a county park. Yosemite is completely different. It's an entire world that has its own mountain ranges, its own wildlife. It's a window into the ancient earth, the earth that once was, the earth that will always be. Park is not a strong enough term to describe what's beyond this gate. How you doing?
Thank you.
You know, I don't know what you folks want. We could go for a little walk, or I could just talk to you right here. How many of you are too comfortable to move? I'm not going to walk that far. Now, my name is Sergeant Elise Bowman, and what I was hoping to do is talk to you about Yosemite, which seems a good topic, and about why there are colored soldiers in Yosemite. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
Now, I don't want to start walking down that path and get out there and there's no one behind me, because then you're going to see a soldier start to cry. So you really with me? Okay, then follow me. All right. I can't really say that I'm portraying a real person. I am embodying a real name. The name Elise Bowman is on the muster rolls, which is a listing of all the soldiers who served in Yosemite in the 9th Cavalry. So I made Elise Bowman a composite figure to stand for the 400 to 500 other soldiers, these African-American soldiers who served alongside him. Could you come on up, get closer? Folks, could you come on up, get closer still? No, come on closer. Could you come on up, please?
Could you come on up? You're too far away. Why are you doing way back there? Just come on up. I'm gonna be honest with you. I didn't know much about Yosemite when I got here. We got the word at the Presidio of San Francisco that we were going to be protecting Yosemite National Park all summer long. This is the summer of last year, 1903. We had no idea what Yosemite was. All we knew, it was something called a national park. We had no idea if this was going to be good duty or bad duty. Show me your hands right now. How many of you folks think this is good duty if you get assigned to Yosemite? How many of you are thinking about enlisting yourself if this is your duty right here? When we were riding through the Lombard Gate of the Presidio of San Francisco, there was a sentry, and he was looking down at us as we were riding through. And just as I got close to him, he said, "It just ain't fair. These niggers are going up to Yosemite. This is a white man's job. What's this army coming to?" It was then and there that I realized that this was good duty. Because if that sentry wanted to be in Yosemite, maybe we need to be there too. When I came here 15 years ago, I had no idea that African American soldiers had anything to do with the national parks. And then I saw the photograph of the 24th Infantry taken in 1899, sitting on a table in Yosemite's research library. This right here is the image that changed my life. So this is the earliest shot of African Americans here in Yosemite National Park in an official capacity. These were park protectors, park rangers before the term was even coined. Those were the Buffalo Soldiers. And when I saw this image, my heart just sort of went, what's that? They called me a Buffalo Soldier, and I got that name because the Indians we were fighting in the Indian Wars, they saw the hair of these soldiers in the 9th Cavalry and the 10th Cavalry, and they saw that their hair was just like the hair between the horns of the buffalo. So they started calling them Buffalo Soldiers out of respect. It sounds a whole lot better than nigger cavalry. The Buffalo Soldiers fought native peoples. The Buffalo Soldiers fought the insurrectos in the Philippines. The Buffalo Soldiers fought the Spanish in the Spanish-American War in Cuba. But the battlefield that was rarely mentioned was the battlefield of race.
Tomorrow we're going to get on a bus and we're going to take this road that crosses the entire park.
African Americans, their visitation is less than 1% of the visitation to Yosemite.
And the second day, we're going to do a day hike and summit Clouds Rest, hopefully, try our best to summit.
When I saw that image, I saw the bridge that would tie wilderness to the African American community right there in the faces and in the eyes of those dead soldiers who were looking at me from across a distance of 100 years. And I knew in the instant that I saw that I was looking at the most significant thing that I had to do in my career as a park ranger. This is one of the Buffalo Soldier regiments that served in the West. I don't know these guys. I'm not related to these guys. Okay, I'm gonna have to break this to you. I'm African American. And I'm a park ranger. And there aren't a lot of African American park rangers. In Yosemite, there's me, then there's me, and there's also me. Buffalo Soldiers were African American Army regiments that served in the West, fighting in the Indian Wars, but they also served here in Yosemite. So I'm protecting Yosemite, they were protecting Yosemite, I'm wearing a uniform, they're wearing a uniform, so you tell me, young man, how excited was I?
Extremely excited.
Oh yeah, I was extremely excited. There were African American soldiers who were part of the Western frontier, who were part of that whole mythology. In 1903, Charles Young, the third African American to graduate from West Point, was the acting military superintendent of Sequoia National Park. He's one of my heroes. You know, when this was happening, there were only parks in Yellowstone, Sequoia, and Mount Rainier. The idea of parks was such a new thing that people behaved inappropriately. They saw something on the ground they wanted, they'd pick it up and they'd walk out with it. The mindset was, trees are good for building towns. You know, wildlife is good for feeding your family. There's a utilitarian purpose to the land. It's there for us. The frontier was declared closed around 1890, and now we're saying, protect the earth, protect the land. So to say that beauty is also there for us, it's a whole new thing.
very few African Americans were in any position of authority in 1903 and 1904. There were still people around who had been the enslavers and the enslaved. It was still living memory. And so they're here telling people what they could and could not do to people who were not used to being questioned at all by African Americans. And when you consider that in 1903, 1904, an African American was being lynched on a daily basis in the South, and that African Americans occupied one of the lowest rungs of the social ladder, I mean, it's a pretty amazing thing that they were doing what they were doing.
Can you folks come closer? I gotta ask you something. How many of you folks knew when I stopped right here, you said to yourself, well, that soldier is stopping us right in the shade of a culture. You see right above us right here? This is an oak tree. This is a California black oak. And a California black oak produces an acorn. Look right here. Let me show you something. Here's an acorn, and the ground squirrels and the gray squirrels eat that acorn, but the Indians eat the acorn as well. And when you look at that tree and you can recognize that tree, you look around and you see that there are other trees just like it, right there, and right there, and right there. And you realize that we are not just in a valley. We are in a culture, and this is the crop of that culture. And you're looking at something that is rooted here and a culture that is rooted and intertwined with those roots of this plant.
In 1904, the Buffalo Soldiers here in Yosemite built what is considered to be the first museum in the national park system. It was an arboretum near the South Fork of the Merced. In 1903, the 9th Cavalry in Sequoia National Park built the first usable wagon road into Giant Forest. Also, in 1903, the Buffalo Soldiers in Sequoia built the first trail to the top of Mount Whitney, which in those days was the highest mountain in the United States. If that's not worthy of being remembered, I don't know what is. There's nothing more democratic than a national park. You are going into a wonderland. You are going into a different world. And doesn't everyone deserve the right to experience what it must have felt like to be in a place that no one has ever been before? We can all have that experience on any trail in any national park. So why should only part of the population have that sense of wonder and that experience of discovery? Why can't African Americans and Latinos and Asian Americans and everybody have that experience? Because that is part of the experience of being an American. It belongs to everyone. Could we lower the audience lights for a bit? I like mood. I like atmosphere, because I'm a ranger in Yosemite Valley, which is filled with mood and atmosphere, such that you feel that you're in a place unlike any other in the world. And working in Yosemite over the last 18 years, being in a park that is iconic throughout the world, and then discovering for myself that African Americans played a role, a significant role, in the stewardship and the protection and the preservation of an iconic national park was, for me, like striking gold. Except, of course, if I had really struck gold, then I couldn't claim it because I'm a federal employee and all of that. But, so I have to speak in a metaphorical language, but it was like striking gold. Because for me, it wasn't just a history. Every story, every history is a bridge. It's a means of going across from one thing to another. You can enter another world by just hearing a good story. And so being the only permanent African American ranger in the Sierra, and recognizing that 100 years ago there were more African Americans in an official capacity in Yosemite and Sequoia than there are today, I realized the power of this particular story. And so for the last 15 years, I have been obsessed, and I'm using the correct term, obsessed with getting this story out because my vision, my dream from the very beginning of when this history encountered me, not me encountering the story, but when this story impacted me, my dream was that one day, and you saw that photo of the guys on horseback? You're seeing guys on horseback. I'm looking at that same photograph and I'm saying to myself, Jamie Foxx, Morgan Freeman, Denzel Washington. I mean, I already have a Hollywood film worked out. Why? Because I recognize that film is the medium of the 20th and 21st century. If you want to get a story and communicate it effectively to a mass audience, film is the way to go. So that's been my passion. That's what's been driving me for all of these years. And I have to say to you, even just letting you know, that it just happened in May. I was invited by Robert Redford to speak at Sundance and read from my book. And I was beyond happy. It was clinical how happy I was. And then Robert Redford never showed up. Because he's finishing up a film, and I just remember thinking and saying to myself, a film project of his is more important than helping me reach out with this history to America. I've forgiven him, just so you know. I've forgiven him. But I should also point out that it is so unlikely that I'm here talking to you, and there's something I'm going to have to do right now. You see, because I'm interested in tearing bridges down. I'm interested in reaching out and communicating to people. And so when you're in this artifice of a stage, it creates this structural distance between oneself and the people you're trying to communicate with. And all I really want to do is something like, hi, how are you? You know, you look like someone who's interested in a story. You are. There's so many great stories. You know, my life actually is a story, and everyone's life is a story. As a matter of fact, as I peer into your eyes, I recognize that if they are truly windows of the soul, there are so many stories behind you as well, and that none of us are by themselves. All of us, literally, are all who came before us. So there's something ancestral burning in your eyes, and I love that fire. Yeah. Excuse me, folks, I'm just, that's wrong. Oh, tell me more. Wow, that's just great. And that's the kind of interpreter I am. That's the kind of person that I am. And so for me, it is a sacred act. Every time I put that cavalry uniform on, it's like a matador with that suit of lights. I'm just feeling this energy that's coming from the dead, who I feel are still listening. Just like my father, who, by the way, is the main character in my book. And in my living history presentation, I modeled that personage after my dad, because my dad served in Korea, in the infantry. My dad served in Vietnam. And I felt that his generation never received the proper due, which of course is, thank you for your service. You know, look at this. It seems very insignificant, but it is the most powerful thing to actually say thank you to someone and look at them in the eyes and say, I really appreciate the work that you've done, because that never happened to my father. And to his generation who served in that war, it was more like this. They were shunned and people turned away. And so that's why Elise Bowman, the character in my presentation, is actually my dad. And I wrote that for my dad. Because you know what? It's great to please people who are alive and looking at you, but you know, there's a debt of gratitude we owe to those who came before us. And so how can I say thank you enough to the people who had the strength and the resilience to resist so much and keep smiling and keep singing and keep moving forward? Now you're getting a sense that's kind of where I'm from, but that's not really the physical place that I'm from. I'm from Detroit. And when I say that, I don't know if you can pick up the energy when you say it. I'm from Detroit. I'm from the inner city in Detroit. And the likelihood of an African American from Detroit becoming a national park ranger, let's just say it is not likelihood. It is beyond a game of chance. It is exceedingly remote. As far as I know, I believe I'm the only national park ranger who was born and raised in Detroit, who's African American. And part of me finds it appealing and disturbing at the same time. Because my feeling is that for parks to survive, for national parks to be sustainable, everyone has to be on board with the beauty of these places. Everyone. It can't be for a select group of people. It has to be for actually everyone. And I'm still thinking that the last time I was in Detroit with Dayton Duncan, with a national park film, at my old alma mater, Cass Technical High School, how few of the teachers thought that what we were doing was important enough to empty their classrooms into the theater for them to see a graduate of that high school appearing in a film that eventually would be seen by 34 million people. That didn't happen. Some of the teachers said, well, I don't think that's important enough. And I just looked at Dayton. Dayton looked at me and he says, you know, you just keep moving forward. But the film did come out, and it is having that impact. But I think that right now, in Detroit, there's a little boy, like I was. There's a little girl, and they're going to sleep this evening. But are they thinking, are they dreaming, are they hoping that one day they too will be at the south rim of the Grand Canyon and see, as Teddy Roosevelt once said, the one great sight every American should see? I was so heartened when I saw President Obama take his family to Yellowstone and to the Grand Canyon. When I saw those kids and the look on their faces of excitement, of exaltation, of just because they were thrilled, because how could you not be thrilled when there's a geyser erupting in front of you? That's also clinical. You have to be excited because the earth itself is excited beneath your feet. But so few families have had that kind of experience. And that is what has fueled me over the years to tell this particular story. So when people ask me, so why do you tell the story of the Buffalo Soldiers? In the hope of creating a bridge that changes the future. I'm not thinking so much about the present. I'm always thinking about what will be, because I am so deeply aware of what was. You know, there was a time when separate and equal was the law right around here in my dad's day. And now, Roosevelt Arch, Yellowstone National Park, for the benefit and enjoyment of the people. And everyone is welcome. And so it strikes me to the point of tears to be in the Yosemite Valley Visitor Center and to hear Flemish, Dutch, German, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese. I meet folks from South America. I meet folks from every country in Europe, and I'm thinking that there is an African-American family, or are African-American families in Fresno, in Modesto, in Oakland, in Los Angeles, who aren't there in Yosemite, even though that iconic landscape was once protected by the 9th Cavalry. And so I came up with a solution. My solution was to drive into these areas with a large van and to take children, abduct them, and take them into the park so that they could be exposed to the wonder of Yosemite. But I think I thought about it and I realized that was not the correct path. But when you feel so deeply about something, doesn't it make you just want to do something rash? And I admit that that was rash, but again, the passion that I have for making that connection is what made me have that sentiment. Because I have seen the looks on the faces of these kids who were thinking, this is nothing. I mean, I can show you. They look like this. They get out of the van. They're at Curry Village, and they're tough because, you know, they grow up in East LA. They grow up in Compton. You have to be tough. It's like growing up in Detroit. You can't let anyone see that there's any kind of weakness, because predators prey on weakness. I didn't learn about predator-prey relationships in Yellowstone. I learned about them plenty of times in Detroit. That's where I learned how to be strong. And so these young men will come out of the van and they do this. And then this happens. That's what keeps me going, is to see that look. And it's the same look that the people have on their faces that are from Germany, that are from Argentina, that are from everywhere else. We are all unified by these moments of wonder, these moments of recognition of the sublime in our lives. You don't have to die to go to heaven. You just need good public transportation. If you're standing at Glacier Point at sunset, there's no one that needs to tell you, do you believe in the presence of the divine? Because all you have to do is like, there it is, right there. Yes, geological processes are at work, but there is some other spark that is burning in the range of light. Someone writing this down? Good, good. So the question then becomes, how do we solve this? How do we solve this? Because it's a big problem. 2050, 50-50 by 2050, California New Mexico. There's certain states that will be a minority-majority culture by 2050. So what does that bode for the Park Service if there are populations that are not connected? Then the question becomes, how do we connect the disconnected? And people have asked me that, and they said, well, you can go into schools. Ken wanted me to do that. He kept saying, Shelton, I hope, you're in the classrooms, that's where you need to be. And I remember thinking, well, Ken, I was in a classroom. I remember being in Southeast DC, Anacostia, years ago. And I was there, and I'm looking at you because I'm telling you this story, I was in Anacostia, and I was there right during the height of the crack wars that were going on there. And I remember talking to the kids who were there, and they were very young, and they looked so innocent, and someone told me about things that they had experienced. And so I just asked, I said, how many of you young people have ever seen a dead person? 3/4 of the class raised their hand, had seen a dead body, a dead person. And I said, how many of you have been to the Grand Canyon? No hand was raised. To Zion, no hand was raised. To Yellowstone, no hand was raised. I said, this is wrong. How can people experience sometimes the worst of what our culture can offer, but not the best of what our culture can offer, and yet those young people will grow up to be citizens whose taxes will pay for the national parks? And I was thinking that. And I was just thinking and looking at them thinking, they, of all people, need wonder. They, of all people, need this sense of a greater world that's around them. They, of all people, need the sublime. When you don't know how your rent is going to be paid in a week or so, it would help to have an insertion of the sublime in your life, to let you know that there is another place where this won't matter. And that's the power. That's the power of these places. It takes us out of our problems and puts us into a place where there are no problems. How many folks here listening to me right now have had that experience of being so transported by the beauty of the national parks, you forgot what problems you were having? And how many of you have also felt this deepening of affection between you and the person that you were with? As Dayton so well put it, is that you remember not only these places, but the hand of the person you were holding when you had that experience. And so what I'm thinking of the young people in Detroit who were like me, who are not growing up having these experiences of wonder. People talk about nature deficit disorder. What happens when there's an absence of wonder in your life? When there's an absence of the sublime in your life? When we were all at one time tribal people, and we were at one time indigenous people, wonder was all around us. That's the beginning of folk stories and myths and legends. But it's so hard to have that now, but you can retrieve it, and we can all retrieve it in the national parks. And so that's my message. My message is that you can go home. Thomas Wolfe wasn't correct. You can go home again. And it's the national parks. And it's something even deeper. America, at its best, it's in these landscapes. Because we were shaped, I believe that we were shaped as a people by wilderness, by these landscapes, by canyons, by rivers, by plains, we were shaped by that. And when we all arrived on these shores, we were not Americans. We were English or Dutch or French. We were all these other things. But in that process of working the land, we were worked by the land. And that's when we became Americans. And I find it very interesting that in 1890, when the frontier was declared closed, that's when we start having the first national parks. Yellowstone, 1872, and Sequoia and Yosemite in 1890. I don't think it's by happenstance. I think that I don't think necessarily it's design, but I think that there's a reason why these things are happening. But there's got to be a way to reach out and bring everyone on board so that we all are taking part in this great project that we have going on with the national parks. So I could go on and on. I mean, people, I just feel like that I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be so close to where my father grew up. I know that my ancestry is tied to this place. And so I'm just thrilled to be here at Clemson. I'm thrilled to be here in South Carolina. And I'm thrilled to know that there is still passion. How many of you folks are passionate about the parks? That's not passion. You just did that. I will ask that again. How many of you folks are passionate about the national parks? That was so close it was almost legal. How many of you folks would stand up if your favorite place was threatened, stand up and say, you will not touch this place. How many of you would do that? How about if you stand up and tell me that? How many of you would stand up and say, you will not touch, that's excellent, Gene. You will not touch my favorite place. And how many of you would also be willing to reach out your hand to someone you feel this person needs this place? I mean, how is that for an antidote to modern life? Imagine a doctor coming up to you saying, oh, well, your pulse is racing, your hands are a little bit clammy here. You know, you need Everglades bad. How would it feel if you get pulled over by a police officer and you think it's because you, and I didn't say sit down, by the way, and you didn't say, and the police officer pulls you over and looks at your driver's license and then says, can I see your license, sir? According to this, that you haven't been to the Grand Canyon in 3 years. I'm sorry, that's against federal law.
All right, I like that.
I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to give you, this is a first-time offense, but you need to be in the Grand Canyon in 2 weeks, or I'm going to have you summoned before the judge. There you go.
Hey, I like that.
How's that? You know what? You can't, come here. You folks couldn't see that back there. Look at this smile at getting that citation.
That was good.
Yeah, that was a good citation. Yeah. Okay, you can sit down again. Sit down again. But I did that for a particular reason because my feeling is that when people ask me, do you think the parks will survive? My feeling is they will survive as long as the passion of the American people for the parks survive. And so whenever I'm talking to a group and I feel that there's anything tentative, that just makes me go. I want people to get up out of their seats and say and speak from the heart, because the parks exist because people stood up and spoke from the heart, gave all of themselves to these places. And I feel that it is my duty as a park ranger to pass on that joy and that resistance and that sense of responsibility, and that's what drives me. And I think that there is a solution. And to be honest with you, I am not afraid. It's easy to look out there and just go, oh, oil spill. Oh. It's easy to look out there and being afraid. But if you're afraid, then there's no movement. You have to just say, okay, that was bad. We need to move forward, and we need to make things happen. We need to do the good work that needs to be done. That's what we need. And that's why I'm certain, aren't there some young people here? I'm 52, so I'm no longer considered as young. Like right there, look at that. Oh, look at that. He's smiling. And look, I can see it in you too as well. Because I'm looking at the future. Right there. There's the future right there. And I'm looking at these folks. They're not sitting there going, yeah, there's no hope. The thought more is like, yeah, you guys messed it up for us, but we're going to fix it. Am I right? Show confidence. Am I right? Yeah. You can't say, I think I might have a solution to global warming. You have to come up with it. What's that? He might have a solution. That's right. And that's what we're depending on. Because remember, there are people in the past who felt as passionate about the world and about not just saving the world, but it's not saving the world. I hate to break this. The world does not need to be saved. We are the ones that need to be saved. It's our own survival that we're talking about. And the thing is that I love about that, it begins just with joy and love and sharing that. This almost sounds like a movement.
I like it.
Well, if we all left here, Fran, you could start it. You have that energy. But if you walked out of here and said, follow me, we're going to change Washington, by the time we got to Washington, we'd be very tired and very hungry. But those are the sort of folks who tend to get things done. Tired, hungry, and they have a mission and they want to accomplish it. Yeah. So I'm not here to talk a long time. I'm here to answer questions, and I just wanted to say hello to you and thank you for coming here to listen to me. I don't think that my life is all that complicated. I think my life is pretty typical. I'm a typical inner city African American from Detroit who decides to major in poetry after serving in the Peace Corps as a 7th grade English teacher, then becoming a park ranger. That's typical from Detroit. I've just chosen a different path, and I've chosen probably against my father's wishes, and I'm certain there's people here who have done things against their parents' wishes, and that was a choice that I made, but I never regret making that choice because it's something that I felt in here. And I want to say something else just to the young people, just in conclusion, and until we go to the part of answering questions, that if I were president, and I met the president, I didn't say this to him, but I was thinking about it. If I were president, I would make it illegal to in any way diminish someone's dream. because dreams are what we need to fuel ourselves and our communities. And so when someone has a dream, what they need is this. Oh, that's one heck of a dream you got there. Anything you need to support that, you let me know. The worst thing is when parents and relatives and family say things like, you want to be a chemist? That's a lot of math. They just said, you will never be a chemist. And they should be going like this, chemist? That's right, chemist. Yeah, that would get you actually praise. Yeah, so praise dreams and don't shut them down. Because I heard a lot of that growing up in Detroit, believe me. And I don't want to hear that anymore. I want to hear a culture that is supportive of the individual and collective dreams of the people that are part of that country. Because no telling how far we could go in that kind of culture with that kind of society. How's that sound? Yeah. So until we get to the point where we're answering questions, I was told by Brett that I said, how long do I have? He said, oh, probably I'd give it till midnight. If they get tired around midnight or 1, you can stop. But I figure we have plenty of time. But this is my way of saying what I've said in a way that's a little bit clearer. Thank you. All right, questions? Is there anyone curious about, yes?
Do you find the sublime in urban areas, in urban parks or historic center of Detroit, or do you find it only in wilderness?
I find the sublime whenever I wake up and whenever I go to sleep. I found the sublime in Detroit. It's amazing how flowers don't know where they're blooming. You know, they don't come up and say, this is a project. I can't share my color with the sky here. I need to go to Arizona. No, the flower just goes, oh, look, just the sort of place that needs me. Yeah. So I think you can be inspired and you can find the sublime wherever you go because the transcendent is all around us. Yeah. But it's easier at Glacier Point. You just have to work harder in Detroit. Pardon? I am a poet. I am on medication, but it is an irresistible and outward trending thing. Yeah. Yeah. A tiny what? You know, I don't recite my poems. I basically. By the way, that's a poem. Yeah. I'll sign it for you. Yeah. Oh, really? Excuse me one moment here. Hi.
Thank you so much.
Thank
You
you.
do a great job.
Thank you. Right there. Thank you. Yes?
How did you make the leap from poet to park ranger? I know there was a teacher in there.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That's a big stretch.
It's not too big a stretch if you're thoroughly desperate. And you're trying to live up to your father's ideals and aspirations. My father was a sergeant in the Army. I got to say that again. My father was a sergeant in the United States Army. Very practical, very pragmatic. And so he had issues with his little boy majoring in poetry. When I told him that, he seemed to be saying, he smiled and said, I will be supporting you for the rest of my natural life. That's what I thought he was saying. But my feeling has always been that one of my heroes is Joseph Campbell. And one thing that he said that I have always admired is that the whole notion of following your bliss, what makes you happy. And what I've said to my son is that if you are the best at what you do, you'll make a living. You just have to be the best at it, or pretty close. And so I felt that I love poetry, I love music, I love art. Why wouldn't that be a great background for a park ranger? And I happened to meet the chief of interpretation in Yellowstone, George Robinson, who happened, I love this, he happened to be looking for a poet. He wanted a musician, a poet, and an artist, because he recognized that the first national parks were celebrated not at first hand, but through the art of Thomas Hill, Bierstadt, Thomas Cole, the Hudson River School, right? So he recognized that, and so he was looking for a poet. I love that. Park managers looking for poets. I'm waiting for that want ad in the New York Times. Wanted, poet, please see director of the National Park Service. Is that a hint? Yeah. So I love nature, I love the outdoors, and I wanted to be in a place where I could find myself immersed in that environment. And what could be better? Remember, inner city kid from Detroit, Yellowstone National Park. It was Wonderland. It was just amazing. It was absolutely an amazing, transformative experience. Yeah. What's that? That sounds like a blues song, and it probably is. She said it's a long ways from Hamtramck, which is near Detroit. But ma'am, there were no national park experiences for me as a child. They were just city parks and county parks. But I lived in Germany with my dad and my mom and my brother, and my dad took my brother and I to Berchtesgaden. And so we were way up in the mountains, and that's the earliest childhood memory I have, is holding my father's hand and my mother's hand while I was elevated in the sublime landscape of wind and sky and snow. And I felt like this wind that was blowing was the breath of God itself. And it didn't blow on me, it blew through me, but I couldn't get blown away because my parents were keeping me on this earth, holding on to me. And my dad never let go. He's passed away 3 years ago, but I can still feel his hand right there. And so what I'm saying is, when you take your kids to the mountains, you need to be very mindful of dealing with the consequences. I'm serious, because that stayed not only in my mind, it stayed in my heart, it stayed in my marrow, in the marrow of my bones. It's shining there like some undiscovered ore, just burning there like radium in the dark. Those mountains. And I tell you, when do you need it the most? When you're in inner city Detroit, when you can close your eyes and imagine someplace beyond that is exquisitely beautiful. So I was in Detroit, haunted by the Alps. And that kept me sane, kept me who I was, tied to something that didn't seem to be around me at all. Yeah. Any other questions? What did Mura say to Emerson? I'm trying to remember now. No need to worry about time, for you will be with me in eternity. Something like that. You know, I would say that 5 minutes in Yosemite can change your life. 5 minutes of the Grand Canyon can change. 5 minutes in Canyon de Chelly, Chaco Canyon, Zion, Canyonlands, any place where there is more earth than people can transform you. Especially in our, keep in mind that in 1900 a census was done that determined that 90% of Americans lived in rural America. By 2000, it was 90% of Americans in urban America. We are all on the edge of a transfigured, transformative experience, and all it takes is to hop in a car, public transportation, and get to a national park. Yeah. I don't know if I answered your question. As a federal employee, I'm supposed to. Did I answer that question? Absolutely, okay. You know, I'm serious. I'm going by the rules and regulations. Answer every single question. Yeah. Any other questions? By the way, I like you folks. I'll see you all in Yosemite, right? And we'll go out. We'll go for a walk.
Do you all recruit colleges?
Yes, we recruit from colleges. Yeah. And the students are thrilled about it. I mean, what student wouldn't be thrilled about, oh, what are you doing this summer? Oh, I got a job at the coffee shop. Oh, how about you? Oh, I'm working for my dad, you know, at his service. Oh, how about you? I'm going to Zion. Notice how my voice changed? I'm going to Zion. Who wouldn't want to? Let's all go to Zion. Yes, ma'am? How many parks have I worked in? Not that many. I've worked in Yellowstone, and the National Capital Parks East, Great Basin National Park, and then the last 18 years in Yosemite. And I have thought about leaving Yosemite, but every time I'm actually about to act on it, I start crying. And then I start hearing from my wife, who's from San Francisco, who loves Yosemite, who says very subtle things to me like, if I'm thinking about going, pack well. Take warm clothes with you. Oh, and write to us and let us know how you're doing. She's so subtle. Harper's Ferry? I love Harper's Ferry. I've been there several times. But I can't leave the range of light. It's the new federal protocol. Yeah, once you're in Yosemite for a certain length of time, like Carl Sharsmith, who worked over 63 years, you can't leave without suffering some sort of health issue. Yeah, I mean, you don't want to see me get sick. Yeah, so I have to stay in Yosemite. Yeah. Oh, there you are.
Didn't know how long they keep you up here again.
I don't know. I mean, I'm just waiting to see if these folks have any other questions, but.
Well, he's got to change before he can sign books because of another obscure federal law that won't allow him to sign his own book in a federal uniform. So he's going to have to make a quick change. He's doing his Clark Kent thing right back there. And then he'll be out and a chance to talk to him a little bit more while he's out signing books. But we have just a little token of remembrance, and this is reflections on one of our special places, the Clemson Forest.
Oh, okay, that's
and
great.
it surrounds us, it's part of our home and our place.
Okay.
And we think you'd enjoy it.
Oh, thank you. And I have one little piece of news that I can share with you because we're all the way out here. But when I get back to Yosemite, this is just something we gotta keep quiet with us, okay? I'll be working with the Oprah Winfrey Show. Oh, could you do that ooh sound again? I'll try that again. I'll be working with the Oprah Winfrey Show. Oh. You're hired. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.